Well, today we're going to kick off our brand new series of the summer. It's something I'm going to be doing every single week. It's the Recruit of the Week. So who this week, which five-star quarterback is LSU targeting? What's he like? And why does LSU need to be in the mix? We'll break all of that down, plus more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU just a few years ago, and now I do sports talk radio in Nashville, Tennessee. But we're doing a brand new series. If you're new to Locked on LSU, then welcome. But if you've been listening for a while, this is something new for the summer that we're going to do, especially since the June recruiting period is starting to ramp up. But the recruit of the week, I'll be looking at who is LSU targeting, who LSU should target, big names on the recruiting market, and also big names that might not be going to LSU, but elsewhere. But on today's edition, I wanted to focus in on the quarterbacks because obviously the four names that we have been discussing over the past couple of months are going to be our number one focus, especially when, things start to ramp up, especially September 4th, whenever LSU kicks off against Florida State. But at this time, it's prime time recruiting time because the June recruiting period is so incredibly important for taking those official and unofficial visits. So the recruit of the week this week, drum roll, please. And of course, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Drum roll, please. The recruit of the week this week is Dante Moore, a five-star quarterback out of Detroit, Michigan, Martin Luther King High School, the number 4 quarterback on 247sports.com in the 2023 class. So why Dante Moore? So the Elite 11 Finals is coming up in just a couple of weeks. If you don't know what the Elite 11 is, it's essentially, I think of it as like a very exclusive quarterback camp. So it brings the top quarterbacks in the senior class for a weekend. It's really intense drills, coaching, and it's also in the classroom types of things. You're going over X's and O's, going over film. It's essentially just like a very intense quarterback camp, selecting some of the top talent in the country to kind of go head to head to find out who is the top quarterback recruit. So, you look at some of the alum that have gone through the Elite 11 camp most recently, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Jaden Daniels was actually one of the Elite 11 competitors, however you want to call it, in 2018. You look even further back, Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, Drew Brees, Jameis Winston, Teddy Bridgewater, Matthew Stafford, Tim Tebow. The list of Elite 11 alum goes on and on and on. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is no guarantee that you're going to ball out in college. There are plenty of Elite 11 alum who struggled to find landing places, who have kind of been bounced around from team to team to team in the league. So this by no means is a perfect formula to find the best next thing, the next Aaron Rodgers, the next Andrew Luck. But it does pit some of the top quarterback recruits against one another to kind of see who is one that emerges as the top, not just on the field, but also in the classroom as well. CJ Stroud was most recently named the MVP of the Elite 11. Bryce Young was in that class as well. So, of course, you have plenty of talent that you're working with there. So that's the Elite 11 finals that are coming up in a couple of weeks. And Dante Moore is going to be one of those quarterbacks that will be in attendance. Now, he is not committed quite yet, but he is out of Detroit. So it's interesting to kind of look at the schools that he's pretty hot on. You look at Notre Dame, Michigan, his home team. He has a lot of familial ties to the Michigan football program. He's also looking at Oregon. He's looking at Penn State. So he's looking at a lot of these Midwestern schools, but LSU is one of them that he's incredibly high on that's outside of that kind of Midwestern comfort zone. So that's the reason why I'm looking at Dante Moore, not just because of the Elite 11, but also because he's high on LSU. He's liked what he's seen from this program. Dante Moore took his official visit to LSU the weekend of the spring game. And you can look back at when I check out his social media. It did not take him very long to post a picture of him and Joe. So that, good on LSU for bringing in the big name guys that they knew would kind of make all the recruits' eyes light up and go big. So he took his official visit the weekend of the spring game, and that was important because that weekend, since it was his official visit, he was able to bring his family in. He was able to get the whole squad in, was able to get wined and dined by the LSU football program, and also get a firsthand look of exactly what a Saturday in Death Valley might look like. At least a taste of it in this spring game to say, hey, this is what it's going to be like if I come to LSU, being on the sidelines, being in this environment. Of course, it's just like the most minuscule baby version of what it really is like on a Saturday night. But, just getting the taste of the game day environment. So that was big. Took his official visit the weekend of the spring game. And he did an official interview with 24/7 Sports. They asked, what about LSU? What, made you interested in LSU, and what continues to spark your interest? This is what Dante Moore had to say. He said, Brian Kelly and everybody down there, the playmakers they have, it's like unexpected when you get down there. Quarterbacks love playing with playmakers, and the atmosphere and everything is wonderful. Most definitely will be with LSU quarterback coach Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly to see what Brian Kelly has done. The winningest coach in college, which is not true. He's the winningest coach from Notre Dame, but we don't have to go through semantics. He knows how to win. So that is true. He does know how to win. Does he know how to win at LSU? I guess we'll find out. But Dante Moore definitely high on LSU, not just because of Brian Kelly and his system, but also because of the talent surrounding what talent he would have surrounding him. That's a big thing for quarterbacks is I don't want to be this quarterback that, commits to whatever program and not have any weapons to throw to. I look at Jaden Daniels' 2021 season. 2020 was an outlier as well, but I look at 2021. The difference between Jaden Daniels in 2019, a stellar season, and 2021 was he had no weapons. He had no one to throw to. So Dante Moore is smart and seeing the receiver group, this incredibly gifted, talented, and stacked wide receiver core, and says, those are the kind of guys that I want to be throwing to in college. Now, there's no shortage of wide receiver talent at any of the other schools that he's looking at, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, although he is cooling off quickly on Notre Dame. There is no shortage of wide receiver talent. But also, if you look at LSU's group, they've got playmakers, and they consistently show year after year that they're able to bring in some of the top wide receiver and pass catcher talent in the country. So that's something that's incredibly interesting to him as well. But what has Dante Moore done? What is so interesting about Dante Moore? But you look at his season this past season. As a junior, he led his high school to a 13-1 record, Michigan Division, 3 state championships. So he's a proven winner in high school. And he's in a lot of these, these inner circles of some of the top quarterbacks in the nation. So LSU definitely recruiting him very heavily, and Dante Moore very heavily interested in LSU. There are several other SEC programs that are taking a look at Dante Moore, Texas A&M and Auburn most notably. But I would say out of, just based off of what I've read and based off of what Dante Moore has said so far in his recruiting, he's looking at teams, especially in the Midwest, and also Miami as well. But if you're going to look at SEC teams, it seems like Dante Moore is most high on LSU, SEC. But exactly, why LSU? What is so interesting about Dante Moore? About LSU for Dante Moore? And does LSU really stand a legitimate shot at landing this 5-star quarterback, and why it's important to do that? We'll get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about BetOnline, because it is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, news, odds, and including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL hockey Stanley Cup finals coming up very quickly, Major League Baseball, and of course, all of the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. We had a big NBA playoff game last night. Looking forward to a game 6 there as well. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Now make your second listen all about the NBA draft because the ultimate NBA mock draft starts June 16th with over 50 insiders. Nothing equals the ultimate NBA mock draft. The Locked On NBA Big Board Draft experts plus the Odyssey insiders. The first pick is June 16th later this week. So search the ultimate NBA mock draft and follow now so you don't miss a pick. You'll hear my insider info about Tari Eason as well. So make sure to tune in to that. So Dante Moore, 5-star quarterback recruit out of Detroit, one of the top quarterback recruits in the country. And I feel like all of these, really recruits in general, but especially quarterbacks, have been overshadowed so heavily by Arch Manning, understandably so. However, I think that we've all of kind of averted our attention away from the rest of the talent from this class. So we're looking at Dante Moore, our recruit of the week, 5-star quarterback out of Michigan. So why exactly does Dante Moore matter? How likely is it that LSU is able to land a recruit like Dante Moore? First and foremost, I'll address the first question that I ask. Why is this important? Obviously, it's a 5-star quarterback. It's a very talented player that you want to be part of your team. But I also look at setting LSU up for success in the future because a lot of our conversation surrounding quarterbacks right now is who's starting in 2022? And that's a legitimate question and a legitimate concern. Not a worrisome concern, but just a concern that's raised of, what is this team going to look like in 2022? You can't answer that question if you don't know who's lining up under center. But I look at so much of our quarterback conversation has all been consumed about what's happening in 2022. And then we also look at Garrett Nussmeier and Walker Howard, two young and very talented players that make us feel like we're set up for success in the future. But what's the plan beyond that? That's the tricky thing about college football is we are all thinking about 2022. We're all thinking about Florida State. We're all thinking about Brian Kelly's first season. But Brian Kelly is thinking about Brian Kelly's third, fourth, and fifth seasons. Who's going to be the quarterback? Who's going to set up this team for success beyond that? And I look at the rest of the SEC. Like at Eli Holstein, who's the number 8 quarterback in that class, a 4 or 5-star, depends on, who you look at, whatever, recruiting website you look like. But Eli Holstein is a very talented quarterback who just committed to Alabama. You look at Arch Manning, who of course is still undecided, but it's looking like it's not going to be LSU. He just took his official visit to Georgia. We all saw the photos put out on social media of him wearing the Georgia uniform, the Georgia jersey, so on and so forth. It's not looking like it's going to be LSU. Things could change. He's an in-state kid. He might want to stay in-state. He's already mentioned that he's completely open to a new coaching staff and kind of being part of something that's new. But also, it's been noted that Alabama, Georgia, and Texas are his top 3. Also looking into LSU and Florida as well. Of course, with Eli Holstein committing to Alabama, it seems like Alabama will not be the pick, but he seems to be very high on Georgia. He seems to be fairly high on Texas. Of course, LSU's still in the running. Nothing's official, but also LSU kind of has to cover themselves. So if not Arch Manning, then who? So that's another reason why Dante Moore is going to be such a priority for this LSU recruiting staff is to get in that top quarterback talent, because top quarterback talent is going elsewhere in the SEC, is going to LSU's opponents. And you might think to yourself, okay, well, if Arch Manning goes to Georgia, that's not a team that LSU plays every year. Erase out of your mind every preconceived notion about divisions that you've had, because we're not going to have that in the next few years, especially when Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC. Divisions aren't going to be a thing. It's very likely that LSU could face Georgia, every other year even. So, if Arch Manning does go to Georgia, that's, 2 of LSU's immediate competitors in Alabama and Georgia who have landed some of the top quarterback talent in the country. And we've seen this LSU team without a quarterback. We've seen this LSU and with talented pieces around it. And we've seen this team with a talented quarterback and also talented pieces around it, and you won a national championship. So I think that this old school mindset of LSU has so much talent around the quarterback, but the quarterback talent just isn't there compared to some of the other schools in the SEC. I think I'm hoping and praying, keeping my fingers crossed that is a mentality of the past, and that moving forward, this Brian Kelly era is able to land some of the top quarterback talent in the country. But how likely is it that LSU can land Dante Moore? Why is Dante Moore looking into LSU so heavily as a kid from Detroit? John Garcia, who's a recruiting insider for Sports Illustrated, knows everything about these quarterbacks in the 2023 class, backwards and forwards. And this is what he had to say about Dante Moore and why LSU is so heavily on his radar.
Well, I think it starts with Dante Moore, right? I mean, this was the guy that, the Brian Kelly's been personally recruiting for quite some time. Dante has admitted to me that, hey, that coaching change was the biggest one that affected my recruitment. Multiple schools that are in on him changed coaching staff. But he said, look, this one, Notre Dame to LSU, made the most sense in terms of impacting him because he was obviously being recruited by Notre Dame. He's a Midwest kid from Detroit, Michigan. But he was also being recruited by LSU. So he had been to Baton Rouge a couple of times under Ed Orgeron, and now he wants to see how it feels under Brian Kelly. For early this spring, we thought Dante could come off the board sooner rather than later, and that would probably favor the Midwest schools, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State. But now as time has gone on and he's visited schools outside of the region, Oregon, LSU, Miami, etc., now all of a sudden
So I think the key thing there is my number one takeaway was his previous relationship, not just with Brian Kelly and not just with LSU, but with both. I mean, when Dante Moore was opening up his recruitment, Notre Dame was at the top of the list of schools that he was interested in because he had a very close relationship with Brian Kelly. And that, of course, followed him to LSU, but that wasn't anything new. LSU being on his radar wasn't anything new when Brian Kelly got there. He already had a previously established relationship with Ed Orgeron. He already had been in discussions, with the recruiters under that era. LSU was on his radar earlier, and it was just almost like the perfect marriage of two teams that were heavily recruiting him in LSU and also Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, but Brian Kelly at LSU. It almost feels like the perfect marriage. So that's been two teams, coaching staffs that have been heavily on his recruiting trail ever since the beginning. So that's another big thing. And I think also another thing is that he's taking all of his recruiting very seriously and very slowly. Like John Garcia mentioned, we thought he was going to be bored. It would be an easy decision for him. But he's taking a very calculated approach, taking all of his possible visits and not jumping to any conclusions about where he would like to go. So I think that's a good sign for LSU that he's not already committed to Michigan, which would feel like, the obvious answer for a kid from Detroit with ties to the Michigan football program, that he's taking it all very slowly and has enjoyed his times at LSU so far. I mean, he said about his visit at LSU, it was all very positive. And of course, putting it out on social media as well, just his thoughts on the LSU program. I think it's all positive things. We'll continue to follow Dante Moore's recruiting and also how he can fit into this LSU offense as well. Before we do that, I want to do a quick little roundup of the weekend. I have some LSU baseball thoughts, some NCAA tournament thoughts as well, NCAA baseball tournament, that is. Some thoughts on that as well. So a little bit of an LSU weekend roundup coming up next. A little bit of a weekend roundup from the weekend of LSU sports. First and foremost, we have 4 SEC teams heading to Omaha. Auburn punched their ticket, beating Oregon State last night. Ole Miss is on their way after defeating Southern Miss. Arkansas is on their way. I said Auburn, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M as well. So 4 SEC teams headed to Omaha. Half of the field are SEC teams, which is wild. And the stunner there is that there is no Tennessee, the number 1 seed going into the NCAA tournament, beat by Notre Dame at the Knoxville Super Regional. So kind of a stunner there. But I think that that's one big takeaway I think that we all have had as LSU fans who, are not new to baseball. We understand just how devastating this tournament can be because it's just so hard to win. So we'll keep an eye on what things are looking like in Omaha, but keeping things kind of in-house a little bit. A couple LSU baseball updates. So we learned over the weekend Giovanni De Giacomo announced that he will enter the transfer portal after his 4 seasons with LSU. So it wasn't the best road for Giovanni De Giacomo the past couple of years. Of course, he was dealing with a hamstring injury a couple of seasons ago. And this past season, he only had 18 starts and 68 at-bats. He had a 206 batting average, only 3 home runs, and 13 RBIs on the season. So really not a stellar performance or a stellar season for such a highly touted recruit, Giovanni De Giacomo, coming into LSU. But he took to Twitter and said, "Dear LSU, the past 4 years have been some of the best memories of my life, and I'm forever grateful for the time I've spent here in Baton Rouge." He thanks all of his coaches and talks about how he cherishes his memories so much in Baton Rouge. This Baton Rouge has become a second home to me, and it's a bittersweet goodbye, but I do not regret a single thing. Thank you, Tiger Nation, for everything. 7 out, #forever LSU. Giovanni De Giacomo on his way out. Another player who had entered the transfer portal is LSU infielder Brennan Holt. He also announced that he was entering the transfer portal and announced just a day after Giovanni De Giacomo announced that he was entering the transfer portal that Brennan Holt would head to Oklahoma State. He was a big-time in-state recruit out of Parkview, Baton Rouge kid. He didn't have an extensive LSU career. He only had 5 appearances as a Tiger, coming out in the very first weekend this past season against Maine, against Southern, against Bethune-Cookman, also against UL Monroe. So going over 4 in those games combined, so didn't really play a big role in this LSU team. Neither Brennan Holt nor Giovanni De Giacomo stated reasons of why they're transferring. I have to imagine that Brennan Holt just didn't see a place for himself, didn't see himself carving out a starting role. Is it a coaching thing? I don't know. Is it more so a performance thing? They just needed a fresh start. I don't know. But just from the sound of Giovanni De Giacomo, it's a tough one to say over and over again. There's no hard feelings, and it's really just what they need for themselves in their personal careers. So 2 LSU Tiger baseball players headed out of the program, and those are the 2 that we've heard of since losing to Southern Miss in the regionals. So we'll keep an eye on if any more dominoes start to fall with this top recruiting class coming in for LSU baseball in the 2022 season. And also a little bit on a somber note, longtime LSU SID Bud Johnson passed away this past weekend at the age of 88. So he was with LSU throughout the late 50s. In the AD in the Pete Maravich era. He served as Tulane's athletic director. He served as the PR director for the New Orleans Jazz. And in 2011, he was named the winner of the Distinguished Service Award in Sports Journalism by the Louisiana Sports Writers Association. And he's also in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. So thoughts and prayers to his family. And that's a member of not just LSU athletics, but just sports in Louisiana as a whole. He's a kind of a member of this fabric that's woven together in the state of Louisiana, at least in sports. So thoughts and prayers to his family, because I know the LSU family and the Louisiana family lost a good one this past weekend. But that is going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. To make your second listen to Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Lee Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, the big board. So follow Locked On NBA Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. But coming up tomorrow on Locked On LSU, we'll chat with some friends from Locked On Seminoles. We'll do a preview of LSU Florida State. What are their biggest strengths, some of their biggest weaknesses, and what are they most looking forward to and most nervous about playing LSU in week 1? We'll get into that with them tomorrow. That's going to do it for me today. Appreciate y'all for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day.